Hello everyone, welcome to Manifest IAS and you are watching Current Jokes. These are the crispest current affairs that we can get. In 90 odd videos, we have tried to cover entire spectrum of the current affairs that comes for the civil service examination, especially preliminary examination. So as part of this, we have reached to the environment series now. In this, we will be covering all the current affairs which have come up in the last year or two. So in the starting, we will be taking up few of the policies and reports which were there in the news. So as you can see in the topics list, we will be covering the draft national forest policy, then the draft national resource efficiency policy, then we will be going for the national report 6, that is the report submitted to the Convention on Biodiversity, then All India Tiger Estimation 2018, then status of tiger habitats, then slow leopard estimation in India, then also the state of India's birds report. So these are the topics that we are dealing today. So as part of this, first one is the draft national forest policy.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Around this draft national forest policy, there were many controversies which had come up in the last year or two, because in year 2016 there was one draft national forest policy which had come up in the news and circulation, but because of many controversial points it had, so the environmentalists and the news houses raised those concerns, and Environment Ministry has taken that particular policy back, or it has withdrawn from the public source. Then it has framed its own draft national forest policy in the year 2018. So before going to this policy or the nitty-gritty of this policy, we have to understand few of the aspects of the older policies or the earlier policies what we had. So in 1894 and in 1952, we had national forest policies, especially the 1894 policy, which largely concentrated upon the revenue generation part of the forests. Forests were seen as revenue generating sources, and the conservation part was given little importance there. Then in 1952, there was a balance between the conservation and the revenue extraction from the forest, but mainly it was again tilted towards the revenue generation side only. But when it comes to 1988, so by this time the conservational efforts around the globe and in India had picked up, and in 1988 we recognized the importance of conserving these forests. By then even we had enacted Wildlife Protection Act 1972 and Environmental Protection Act 1986. So from 1988 our view or the viewpoint towards the forests have been changed. Then the objectives of this particular policy is, first one, to safeguard the ecological and livelihood security. So basically when we think of the forest or any ecological resource, we don't only see it from the point of conservation or only from the point of environment, but also we give due care for the people who are depending upon those resources, especially the forest dwellers. So when it comes to the ecological balance and the livelihood aspects of the people who are living in those forests, that has been tried to balance in this particular policy. The next thing is to achieve the very ambitious target of 33% forest cover. This is the 1/3 of the geographical area of India. That is what we are looking at. Right now we have been achieved around 24.5% of the forest plus tree cover in India. Then stability of the fragile ecosystem. So this is mainly the conservational part. So we are giving care to the fragile ecosystems like corals, then other ecosystems like mangroves. So we are giving due care to them. Then the strategies that we are trying to adopt in these things is, one thing is the management of the forest. Already we have defined the forest lands under our revenue policies or under our conservational policies. We have defined the forest, and also we have come up with the idea that we are giving independence to the states to define their own forests. So that may come up in the next year. So until then, whatever the forest that we have defined so far, that has to be managed well. So that is the first part of it. And second part of it is the tree outside the forest. This is where the concept of social forestry will come. Under social forestry, we have seen agroforestry, urban forestry, rural forestry, community forestry. So we are giving thrust in the areas outside the forest areas also to increase the tree cover or the green cover. Then wildlife management. We have enacted many acts like Biodiversity Act and Wildlife Protection Act. So through them, we are trying to robust the laws or the mechanisms to do the wildlife management. So even that is the main part of that. Then coming to the forest industry interface. As I told, we look into the forest as the revenue source, and also we give thrust to the conservation of them. So here we are trying to balance the forest and industry interface, wherein the forward linkage from the forest towards the industry, that will have to be balanced well, and the forest produce which becomes the inputs for the industries, we are giving due care and we are trying to grow them at a good pace. Then the management of the northeastern forest. This has been given a separate head under the draft national forest policy, because northeastern part, if you go area wise, they are covering the maximum percentage cover when you take the certain part of India. So we are giving thrust, and also we are trying to exploit in a very sustainable manner those particular forests. And the research, education and the awareness, we are going to the grassroots level, or we are coming to the local self-government level for the management of the forest. For example, JFMCs, what we have, Joint Forest Management Committees. So we are bringing the research and education and the awareness level to the grassroots levels. And finally, it is about the international commitment. India has been committed, or it is adhering to the many conventions like Convention on Biodiversity, Convention on Climate Change, and also the Convention against the desertification, or to combat the desertification. So India is adhering to that, and the international commitment is very important. When you consider the India's INDCs, or nationally determined contributions towards the Paris Agreement, so that is phenomenal, and we are on the way to achieve them. And also the regional cooperation when it comes to the our neighbors or the extended neighborhood. So that is also very important as far as our regional cooperation is concerned. And we have seen in the past, like we have many joint operations as far as the conservation of the biodiversity is concerned. So these are all of the highlights of the national forest policy, that is the draft national forest policy. So when it is adopted, then we'll get a very good clarity on these things. So until then, we have to know these highlights. The next one is about the resource efficiency policy. So again, we have come up with one draft national resource efficiency policy. Here, when it comes to the national resource, we are not just talking about the resources which are important for the industries, or we are not talking only in terms of the virgin raw materials which are used for the industries, but also we are considering all the necessary sources for any kind of production. So it may encompass all life cycles. It will include water, it will include air, it will include all the nutrients that are there in the atmosphere, lithosphere and the hydrosphere, along with that the minerals also. So we are trying to encompass all the resources and materials used for the life cycles. So we are trying to use them very efficiently. Maybe the principles like 4R, that is reuse, reduce, reprocess, all that thing. So we are trying to include in this one. So we are having a three-pronged approach towards the efficiency, that is the economic part of it, then the social part of it, and environmental part of it. When it comes to economic part, when we use the resources very efficiently, or we reuse the used materials, then definitely we are going for the cost savings and it will reduce the material use. When it comes to social benefit, definitely it will reduce the race for the resources, and definitely it will reduce the social conflict. And also with respect to job opportunities, it will create a lot of job opportunities as far as the reuse of the resources are concerned. And when it comes to the environmental part, definitely all these are done to extract less from the environment or to exploit less the environment. So here this particular approach is three-pronged, that is helping in all aspects of our life, that is economic, social and the environmental. What all are the key indicators that we are trying to adopt in this particular policy? Those key indicators are the resource productivity. It is not just about the virgin raw material that we get, it is also about the processed and the reprocessed materials productivity we are trying to gauge. Then the domestic material consumption. So how much material is consumed by the economy of India, so even we are trying to indicate that one. And also the domestic material extraction, it is the national resource, so how much we are trying to use. So apart from this, we are going to import few of the raw materials also, but we are mainly concentrating on the domestic exploitation of these resources. Then also the direct material input. So it is the ratio of the input to output, how much material we are using and how much goods we are trying to produce and how much value addition that we are doing. So these are the key indicators of that. And when it comes to instruments through which we are trying to implement this policy are the instruments like polluter's pay principle. Polluter's pay principle, it is already been adopted in the urban waste management or in some kind of the processing of the waste material, or maybe it is with respect to the water treatment. So we are trying to adopt the principles like PPP or the polluter's pay principle. Then precautionary principle. So before we use or before we exploit, we are trying to bring up many precautions as far as the resource efficiency is concerned. Then the differential pricing. So especially when it comes to the virgin raw material, we are going to charge them higher, and when it comes to the use of reprocessed or the reuse of the materials, we are going to charge them less. So basically differential pricing is one of the principles we are trying to adopt through this policy. Then finally we are going to put heavy taxes on the landfill, or we are trying to do away with the landfill. So we have many advanced technologies like energy from waste or incineration, or recently we have talked about the technology like polycrack technology, which has been adopted by Indian Railways. So we are going ahead with the advanced technologies rather than the traditional methods like landfill. So these are all the highlights of the draft national resource efficiency policy. So few things that we have to concentrate here is, it is not just about the raw materials that we extract from the lithosphere, it is also about the materials which are very essential for the life, like water, soil and even the air. And three-pronged approach. So how the spheres of life are getting benefited with this, and the key indicators and instruments that we need to concentrate. The next topic is very important topic, that is National Report 6. When it comes to National Report 6, this is the report which is sent by India's Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change to the CBD, or it is the Convention on Biodiversity. We are one of the signatories of this particular convention since 1993, and we are adhering to the principles of this CBD. So under this, India has achieved a lot of things, and India is one of the first Asian country to submit the report, and it is one of the first countries among the mega biodiversity countries also. So under this, what all are the highlights that we need to see? So far, when it comes to the biodiversity, there are two different targets. One is the Aichi biodiversity target, what we talk, and it has 20 different targets. And in line with that, in India, we have 12 NBTs. So 12 NBTs, they are the national biodiversity targets. They are aligned with the 20 global Aichi biodiversity targets. So somewhere these are mapped on each other. Then along with this, the sustainable developmental goals. So sustainable development goals are also aligned with these things. So when one aspirant studies about these targets, they have to be done in tandem. 12 NBTs, 20 ABTs, and the sustainable development goals of the SDGs have to be studied together. Then India has performed in particular NBTs, especially the two NBTs with respect to the area under biodiversity. So in India, we have around 20% area under biodiversity so far. And also with respect to the ABS, that is access and benefit sharing. This is one of the fundamental principles of the Nagoya Protocol that we have adopted under CBD. So access and benefit sharing, or briefly it can be called as ABS. So we have adhered to that one, and we have performed very well as far as the benefit sharing of the biological resources is concerned. And the other 8 NBTs, we are on track. By 2020, we are going to achieve them. Then other 2 targets, yes, we are lagging behind in them, and we are trying to achieve them by 2020, or we can say simply we are striving to meet those targets. So these are the present situation about the 12 NBTs, 12 NBTs what we have. And those 12 NBTs are also part of our National Biodiversity Action Plan too. So one has to know about CBD first, then we have to know about NBAP, that is National Biodiversity Action Plan, and we have to study about National Biodiversity Act. These are part of the static part. Then when it comes to the report, NR6, this is the 6th in the series what we have given to the CBD. And our outlay for the biodiversity conservation is about 70,000 per annum. This is almost equal to the commitment that we had shown, that is around 1 lakh crore. But we have been successful in allocating 70,000 crore per annum for the environmental conservation or for the biodiversity conservation. Then the thrust areas what we have mentioned, or the thrust which have been given are to these sectors, especially agriculture, fisheries, and the forests. So we consider these fisheries as the allied sectors of the agriculture, and when it comes to forest, even the produce, maybe it is minor or the major produce, so we calculate them under the agriculture produce. So they are contributing to the agriculture economy. Then when it comes to the food and nutritional security, we have many programs as far as the food and nutritional security. So under the CBD, one of the main aspect is also the livelihood component of the forest dwellers, and also the people who are living or people who are dependent on the forest. Their nutritional and food security is one of the factors. So we are trying to achieve in good terms as far as these targets are concerned. And the traditional knowledge is another important aspect of the biodiversity conservation. When it comes to the medicinal plants or the traditional methods what we have for many medicines or some of the research oriented programs, so we are depending upon the traditional knowledge, and that has been conserved well. Example is TKDL, that is the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, what we have been successful so far. And population of the threatened species, yes, they are rising in India. As far as the tiger population is concerned, that is 2967 at the moment, and we have more than 500 lions, more than 30,000 elephants, and more than 25,000 single-horned rhinos. So this has been the significant achievement as far as the biodiversity conservation in India is concerned. The next important aspect of this is the All India Tiger Estimation. And when we talk of biodiversity, it considers both flora and fauna. So tiger, since it is an indicator species in India, and the Bengal tiger is also the national animal in India. So we have given a lot of thrust for the conservation or to have a viable population of the tiger. And NTCA, that is National Tiger Conservation Authority, has done very well. And in India, we have nearly 50 tiger reserves, and which are doing well. So this tiger estimation, it is a process once in 4 years, or basically we do it once in 4 years, and such this 2018 survey is the fourth cycle. In 2006, we had 1,411 tigers. In 2010, it grew up by around 25%, and we reached 1,706. And in 2014, it was 2,226. We grew almost by 30%. And when it comes to 2018, so we have been able to put 2,967 tigers, which has been a very good growth. That is almost 33% growth from 2014. And when it comes to the effort towards this survey, it is the world's largest wildlife survey effort as far as the technicality that are being used and the men which are being used and the intensity of sampling and the camera trapping what we have done. This is very significant, and it is one of the biggest exercise. And we have 5 landscapes in India. Just to brief about them, one is the Shivalik and the Gangetic Plains, and second is the Western Ghats, and third is the Central India and the Eastern Ghats, and fourth is the Brahmaputra Plains and the Northeastern Hills, and the fifth one is the Sundarbans. These are the 5 landscapes that we have in India for tigers, and 50 tiger reserves we have. And recently, Madhya Pradesh has been able to put the highest number of tiger in India, and followed by Karnataka 524 and Uttarakhand 442. When it comes to 2014 estimation, Karnataka was on the top and Madhya Pradesh was second. So there have been very good efforts as far as the tiger conservation in Madhya Pradesh is concerned. And we are adhering to one of the declaration that is called as St. Petersburg Declaration, and it was adopted in 2010. And what was the target? The target was to put double the number of the tigers from 2010 to 2022. So before 2022, in the year 2018 only, we have been able to put double the number of the tigers in India. So that we have surpassed, the target has been achieved. And the very sorrow part is when we have seen the significant rise in Madhya Pradesh, there has been a significant decline in Chhattisgarh too. So in Chhattisgarh and Mizoram, we have seen a decline in the number of tigers. And when it comes to particular tiger reserves, especially 3, they are Buxar, Tampa and Palamo, we have not able to trace even a single tiger in these tiger reserves, which is a very sorrow state as far as these 3 tiger reserves are concerned. And when it comes to the technique that we use, we do double sampling technique. So in the first phase, we try to send the forest officials ranging from the range officers and the district forest officers and many ranks under the forest department to collect the raw data. And this raw data is depending upon the pug marks of these tigers and the scattered and the leftover prey. So scattered, especially these are the excretory excretions of the tigers and the leftover prey. So depending upon the prey basis also, we calculate the number of tigers. So this is done in the first phase, and in the second phase we use a particular technique which is called as M-Stripes monitoring system for tigers' intensive protection and the ecological status. So it is having electronic interface to get the data of the tigers. Especially we get the images from the camera traps, and this is the Android application which we use, that is the M-Stripes, and we are going to evaluate the results what we have got from the first phase and second phase, and finally we come up the data, and it is a very accurate data what we have in India right now. So M-Stripes, so how we have the different biometric as far as the iris or our fingerprint is concerned. In the similar way, even the tigers have a particular stripes. So one pattern of stripes is unique to a particular tiger. So that is how the technology is used, and we have got very fantastic results. And as far as the tiger estimation is concerned, we have a lot of home ranges for these tigers. Home ranges means the range up to which the tigers traverse and come back in a day or in few days. So as far as the northeast part is concerned, so we have Bhutan and Bangladesh where the tigers roam on daily basis on a time period, on particular time period basis, and also in the Nepal. In Nepal, especially the interface between the UP and the Nepal, the tigers roam around there, and we have a lot of home ranges in these countries also. And these countries have contributed to our tiger estimation. They have helped in terms of the first phase and the second phase estimation. So this is briefly about the tiger estimation. The next one is about the status of tiger habitats. So when you take the tiger range countries, they are 13 in number so far, and as far as their location is concerned, especially it is mainly concentrated around the South Asia and also the Himalayan ranges. So when it comes to the Himalayan ranges, we have a particular setup to get the estimation of the tiger habitats and the tigers. And again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, Bhutan and Nepal is contributing to this one, and this is the high range habitat estimation or the high range population estimation of the tigers, and it is first of its kind. And Global Tiger Forum, this is the forum which has been made by the 13 range countries, and which are giving inputs, or basically they are contributing to the analysis of the tiger numbers and their habitats, and it has been funded by the IUCN and also the bank called as KfW. It is a German bank which has been funding this particular effort. Then here we look at the high altitude habitat portions of the Nepal, Bhutan and India, and as far as India is concerned, we are covering the 5 Indian states, or you can call it as 2 UTs, that is Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, then 4 different states, that is Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, then the northern part of West Bengal, and also the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Then when it comes to the field surveys, again the field surveys, the primary data collection is being done on particular parameters as we have used in India, like PugMarks or the SCAT, or through the prey basis. Then these field surveys are being supported by secondary information using the technology as we have used in India, and finally we come up with one estimation. So here after collaborating both the data, that is from the first phase and the second phase, we are going to give the estimation, or we attribute it to the geographical locations, and we mark such important corridors or the habitats, or indirectly the numbers of the tigers we take. But when it comes to the tiger census, it is not properly the tiger census, but we get the first-hand information about the habitats and their ranges, and also about their locations in which they are in. Then the human-induced changes also are being counted in this. So maybe it is poaching, or maybe it is for other reasons that the humans interfere into the life cycle of the tigers. So even that are being enumerated under this one, and we are using the remote sense data, and also the GIS, that is geographical information system we are using, and also the ground truthing, that is the information that has been collected from the ground sources. Even they are being collaborated to come up with the proper status of the tiger habitats in India and in the Himalayan range. Next one is the very important thing. As far as the tiger estimation is concerned, we have a lot of advanced technologies, and also we have a particular protocol. So as far as the snow leopard is concerned, it is also one of the endangered species what we have in India, and it has its habitat especially in the Himalayan ranges or in the Central Asian region. And recently we have spotted many snow leopards in India, and our government or the Ministry of Environment is coming up with particular protocol to do the census of this or to assess the population of snow leopards. So national protocol we are coming up with for the assessment, and this has been part of the conservational effort called as GSLEP, or the Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection Program. So it is part of that, and first of its kind process or the protocol that we are coming up with, and we have been consulting many scientific experts, environmentalists, ecologists, and especially we are doing it in 5 different states, or simply the states or the UTs that you consider: Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir, these are the 2 UTs, then Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim and the Arunachal Pradesh. Here we are trying to assess the number of snow leopards. And the range countries, as I have talked, especially Himalayan range countries and the Central Asian countries are the habitats for these snow leopards. So we are trying to enumerate in these areas too. And our target is to double the snow leopard population in India by next decade. So this is our ambitious target as far as the snow leopard population is concerned. The next very important report or the survey what we had got in India so far, it is the State of India's Birds report. So when it comes to the birds in India, there was no such enumeration or the estimation or the exercise had been conducted to analyze the population of the bird species. This is for the first time that has been done in India, and this was a precursor to the one of the conventions that India is a signatory of, that is the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species. When it comes to the migratory species, it is not just restricted to the birds, but it is also to the animals. So as far as the estimation is concerned, it is restricted only to the birds. This is the first comprehensive assessment that has been done in India. It gives the idea about the distribution range and the population of the birds, and also about their conservational status as far as the IUCN Red List is concerned. And as I told, this was the precursor to the 13th COP or 13th Conference of Parties to the CMS, or the Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species. Then under this 67 species have been assessed, and among them 48% have been found to be stable in their population, and more than half of them have been declared. To mark them, the migratory shorebirds, raptors and the vultures, and also some of the birds like sandpipers, pipit and the warbler. So these are the species which have seen decline in number. So if they come under the endangered or the threatened list of IUCN, one has to learn about that too. And we have seen the very good rise in the population of the birds, especially like sterling, pigeon, then ibis and 2 kinds of prenia. And when it comes to the birds which are under the IUCN threatened list, so there are 67. So out of these 67 of them are in the threatened list. And when it comes to the number of peacocks, this is the national bird, the number has raised, but when it comes to the sparrows, we have seen the decline in the number of sparrows. But there are many theories as far as the sparrows decline is concerned, but some of the theories are unwarranted or they don't have proper evidence. Especially when it comes to sparrows, it is with respect to the prey basis what they have, especially the small insects what they eat, so they have reduced in number. That is why we have seen the significant decline in the number of sparrows. And other defining factor is the nesting place for the sparrows have been reduced because of the concrete jungles what we have around. So when it comes to the sparrows population in the rural side, we have seen very good number, but when it comes to the urban area, we have seen the decline. But as far as the effect of the telecom towers are concerned, so that theory has not got proper evidence so far in India. Then this is about what we are trying to cover, and this was the first slide of the this one, the environment current affairs coverage. We have particular features of these videos also. When it comes to the time stamping, you can go to the comment section and you can see the time stamping. You can directly go to the topic that you want. And second thing is, we are attaching the PPTs of these particular slides or PPTs of these videos, which will be very handy for you to refer while you are seeing the video or while you are revising. And the third part is the questions that we put at the end. So every video will be having 2 questions, and we will be collecting these questions and will be solving them at the end of this particular chunk. So until then, read well, revise well, and practice the papers well. All the best. Thank you very much.